The autumn rain lashed against the windows of a Georgian townhouse in Bath, where Eleanor had lived with her husband Richard for over 30 years. She had always considered the house a place of warmth, filled with the smell of books and the faint echo of her piano. But that evening, as she sorted through old papers in the attic, she came upon a document that chilled her to the bone. It was a death certificate. The date struck her first, exactly the same day Jason, her only son, had been born. Her hands trembled as she read the faded ink. The infant's name was missing, and the space for the mother's name had been deliberately scratched out, leaving behind an ugly scar on the page. 1,000 thoughts rushed through her. Could this be a clerical error? Or had someone hidden a truth she was never meant to know? She placed the document on the wooden chest beside her, but her eyes kept returning to it, as though it demanded to be understood. When Richard came home that night, shaking the rain from his coat, Eleanor mentioned the discovery. He gave a dismissive laugh, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and told her she was overthinking. But the way his hand lingered too long on the decanter, the way his eyes avoided hers, spoke louder than words. Eleanor felt a quiet dread bloom in her chest. She could not explain it, but deep down she knew, this piece of paper was not a mistake. It was the beginning of something much darker. The following morning, Eleanor could not silence the unease in her chest. She decided to trace the certificate to its source. The hospital where Jason had been born still stood on the edge of Bath, though the wards had been renovated and renamed over the years. Its red brick facade carried the weight of countless untold stories. Eleanor walked through the corridors, her shoes echoing on the polished floor. She asked at the records office, presenting the worn certificate with trembling fingers. The clerk frowned, shuffled through a series of ledgers, and finally looked up with unease. "This entry should not exist," the woman whispered, lowering her voice. "The page was supposed to be sealed. How did you come by it?" Eleanor's heart pounded. The clerk refused to speak further, yet her expression was enough to confirm Eleanor's fear. Something had been deliberately hidden. As she turned to leave, Eleanor paused near the maternity wing. Memories returned in sharp flashes, the sterile scent, Richard's proud face, the tiny bundle placed in her arms. But now, those memories felt poisoned. On her way out, she caught sight of Richard in the car park. He was not supposed to be there, yet he stood beside a sleek black car, speaking quietly to a woman with auburn hair. Eleanor recognized her instantly, Catherine, Richard's longtime colleague. The two stood close, too close. Catherine's hand rested for a moment on Richard's arm, as though they shared a secret. And when Catherine turned her head slightly, Eleanor saw something in her eyes. Not friendship. Not even admiration. It was something far more dangerous. Eleanor froze, her breath caught in her throat. The death certificate, the hospital records, and now this encounter, it was all beginning to form a picture. But it was a picture she was terrified to see completed. That evening, Eleanor sat in her study with the curtains drawn tight against the drizzle outside. She opened the drawer where Richard kept his old files, carefully searching for anything that might explain the mystery. At first, she found only research notes, grants, and travel receipts. But at the very back, beneath folders marked with fading ink, she discovered an envelope. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Her breath caught as she spread them across the desk. Each photo was of Jason. Some were taken in the hospital as an infant, others as a boy growing up. But what froze Eleanor's blood was not the boy she recognized. It was the woman beside him. Catherine. There she was, holding Jason as a newborn, her arms wrapped around him with a tenderness Eleanor had never witnessed from her. In other pictures, she stood close to Richard, their expressions captured in fleeting moments of intimacy. These were not the smiles of colleagues. They were the smiles of something unspoken, something forbidden. Eleanor's hands shook as she traced the edge of one photograph. The resemblance between Jason and Catherine was undeniable, the same shape of eyes, the same auburn tint that Jason's hair had carried as a child. The house felt suddenly oppressive, every shadow thick with silence. Richard had not yet returned home, and the ticking clock on the mantelpiece grew unbearably loud. Eleanor gathered the photos quickly, sliding them back into the envelope, though the images remained etched in her mind. When the front door finally opened and Richard's footsteps echoed in the hall, Eleanor felt the urge to confront him. But instead, she remained seated in the darkened study, the envelope pressed against her chest. She realized she was not ready to reveal what she had found. Not yet. First, she needed to be certain. First, she needed proof that would strip away every lie. The next days passed with a suffocating heaviness. Eleanor spoke little, moving through the house like a ghost. Jason, now a grown man with his own family, came by one afternoon with his daughter, Lily. Watching him laugh in the garden with the little girl, Eleanor's heart ached. She loved him fiercely. But the question gnawed at her, was he truly hers? That night, when Richard fell asleep in his armchair, Eleanor acted. With trembling hands, she opened a drawer and retrieved a cotton swab she had purchased quietly from the pharmacy. She had read enough to know what she needed. Carefully, she brushed the swab against Jason's mug, which he had left on the table earlier. Her chest tightened with guilt, but she pressed on. She needed answers, no matter the cost. 2 weeks later, the results arrived by post, hidden within a plain envelope. Eleanor locked herself in the study before tearing it open. Her eyes scanned the page, the words blurring as her heart hammered in her ears. The test confirmed what she had begun to suspect. Jason's DNA did not match hers. Eleanor sank into the chair, the paper crumpled in her fist. For a moment, she could not breathe. Every memory of holding Jason, every lullaby sung, every scraped knee tended to, it all seemed to shatter into fragments. Suddenly, the study door opened. Richard stood there, his expression unreadable, his eyes fixed on the paper in her hand. "You should not have done that," he said quietly. His voice carried no anger, only something darker. Something Eleanor had never heard before. Her hands trembled as she tried to hide the test behind her. But Richard stepped forward, his shadow falling across her, and Eleanor realized, he already knew. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The study was heavy with silence, broken only by the faint tick of the clock. Richard closed the door behind him and leaned against it, his face pale beneath the lamplight. "You were never meant to find out," he said at last. His voice was low, almost weary. "Jason is mine. But not yours." The words struck Eleanor like a blade. She gripped the edge of the desk, her breath ragged. Richard stepped closer, his hands clasped behind his back as though he were addressing a lecture hall. Catherine could not keep him. She wanted the child, but she was not strong enough. "I made the decision. We were already married, and you wanted a family so desperately. It was the perfect solution." Eleanor's vision blurred with tears. "You stole her child and gave him to me." "No," Richard said sharply. "I saved him. Catherine would have ruined him. You raised him well, Eleanor. He has everything because of you." The words were twisted, cruelly logical, but Eleanor saw only betrayal. "You lied to me for decades. You let me believe he was mine." Richard's gaze hardened. "Because if you had known the truth, you would have destroyed us all. Some truths are better buried." Eleanor's heart pounded as anger finally eclipsed her grief. "And Catherine," she demanded. "What is she to you now?" For the first time, Richard faltered. His silence spoke volumes. Eleanor saw the flicker of something, longing, guilt, possession, all tangled together. The house felt smaller, darker, as though the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of his deception. Eleanor backed away, clutching the envelope of photographs she had hidden in the drawer. She realized then that Richard's confession was not the end. It was only the beginning of a far more dangerous game, one that Catherine had been playing all along. The following morning, Eleanor could no longer remain still. Richard left early for work, or so he claimed, and Eleanor seized the chance. With the envelope of photographs hidden in her handbag, she made her way across the cobbled streets of Bath to Catherine's townhouse. The house was elegant but cold, its ivy-covered walls shadowed by tall iron gates. When Catherine opened the door, she did not seem surprised. In fact, a faint smile curved her lips, as if she had been expecting Eleanor. "I wondered when you would come," Catherine said smoothly, her auburn hair catching the light like copper flame. Eleanor stepped inside, her chest tight with fury. She placed the envelope on the table between them. "You knew. All these years. You were part of this lie." Catherine poured tea as though nothing were amiss. "Lie," she echoed. "Eleanor, I gave you the greatest gift a woman can receive. A child. Do you not see? Jason flourished because of you." The calmness of her tone made Eleanor's skin crawl. "You let me love him as though he were mine. You stood by while Richard deceived me." Catherine's smile deepened, but her eyes hardened. "I stood by because it suited me. Richard wanted to protect his reputation. You wanted to play mother. And I," she paused, her gaze distant. "I wanted Jason safe. But make no mistake, Eleanor. He is mine." The words sent a shiver through Eleanor. Catherine's voice carried a possessive finality, as if she had merely lent Jason to her. Eleanor clenched her fists. "If you think I will stand aside, you are mistaken. Jason is my son. Nothing you say can change that." Catherine leaned closer, her perfume sharp and cloying. "We shall see. The truth always finds a way to surface, and when it does, Jason will know who truly gave him life. And you, Eleanor, will be nothing but the keeper of someone else's child." The teacup trembled in Eleanor's hand as she realized Catherine was not just Richard's secret. She was a threat waiting to strike. That night, Eleanor returned home shaken. Catherine's words lingered like poison in her mind. Richard sat by the fire, reading as if nothing in their world had changed. But Eleanor could no longer look at him without seeing the deception carved into his face. She climbed the stairs to the bedroom, her thoughts restless. Sleep would not come. Instead, she stood by the window, staring into the rain-soaked street below. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound carried menace. Catherine's confidence, Richard's coldness, it all pointed to something larger than just betrayal. The following morning, Jason arrived unexpectedly with Lily. His eyes were bright with gratitude. "Mum, Catherine invested in my company. She says she believes in me more than anyone ever has." Eleanor's stomach turned. Catherine was already weaving herself into Jason's future. The photographs, the DNA, the confession, all of it came rushing back. But she forced a smile for Jason's sake, hugging him tightly as though to protect him from the claws closing in around him. When Richard entered the room, his gaze lingered on Eleanor with unspoken warning. Jason remained oblivious, chatting about his plans. Yet beneath the surface, the tension was unbearable. Later that day, Eleanor walked to the attic, searching for something, anything, that could arm her against Catherine's grip. Dust filled her throat as she opened old trunks, sifting through years of forgotten possessions. And then, beneath a pile of moth-eaten linens, she found it, a box labeled in Richard's handwriting. Inside lay documents. Hospital records, letters, and even receipts of money transferred discreetly over decades. Each bore Catherine's name. Each tied Richard and Catherine together in ways Eleanor had never imagined. Her hands shook as she read. This was no simple affair. It was a pact. A binding, deliberate arrangement that had lasted nearly a lifetime. And suddenly, footsteps creaked on the stairs behind her. Eleanor froze as the footsteps drew nearer. The attic door creaked open, and Richard's figure emerged from the shadows. His expression was grim, his eyes falling instantly on the box in her lap. "You should not have touched that," he said, his voice sharp with steel. Eleanor rose to her feet, clutching the documents to her chest. "You lied to me, Richard. You lied about Jason, about Catherine, about everything. I know now this was not an accident. You bound yourself to her. You made me part of your deception." Richard's jaw tightened. It was necessary. Catherine had power, connections. Without her, Jason would not have the life he has. "I did what had to be done." "And what about me?" Eleanor's voice broke. "What was I to you, a mask to wear in public? A caretaker for a child that was never mine?" Richard's eyes flickered, the faintest crack in his composure. "You were stability. You were the one who made it all appear respectable." The words struck her like blows. Yet even as tears burned her eyes, anger hardened her resolve. She looked down at the papers in her hand, the proof, the chains of deceit. "You think you can silence me, Richard," she whispered. "You think Catherine can take my son from me? No. I will not vanish into the shadows of your lies." At that moment, a voice echoed from the stairwell. "Mum." Jason stood there, Lily clinging to his hand. His eyes darted from Eleanor's tear-streaked face to Richard's rigid stance, and finally to the papers she held. "What is going on?" he demanded. Eleanor's breath caught. This was the moment, the one she had feared, yet the one that could free her. With trembling hands, she held out the documents. "Jason, you need to see the truth. The truth about where you come from." Richard's voice thundered. "Stop this, Eleanor!" But Jason stepped forward, taking the papers. His eyes scanned them, his face draining of color. "Catherine," he whispered, his voice hollow. "She's my mother." Silence filled the attic, broken only by the storm raging outside. Richard reached out, but Jason recoiled. The betrayal cut deeper than any words could mend. Eleanor placed a hand on her son's shoulder, steadying him. "You are my son," she said firmly. "I raised you. I loved you. No paper, no secret, can change that." Jason's eyes glistened as he looked at her, then at Richard, then back again. The room seemed to tilt under the weight of revelation. Richard tried to speak, but his words faltered. For the first time, his authority crumbled. Catherine's scheme, his deception, all of it lay exposed beneath the attic's dim light. Eleanor stood tall, her voice unwavering. "This ends here. No more lies. No more power over us." Jason drew a breath, the papers trembling in his hand. His silence was an answer in itself. The bond between father and son was broken, but the bond between Eleanor and Jason endured. And as thunder rolled across the sky, Eleanor knew the storm had finally broken. She had reclaimed her life, not as the keeper of secrets, but as the woman who dared to expose them.